But you mentioned Ferrari. They had such a tough go of it at the beginning of that race. You saw Mercedes. We have the next topic number 7. Mercedes having a meltdown in the Monaco Grand Prix. And, you talk about Ferrari, you talk about Mercedes, 2 of the top cars, on the circuit, having these problems in the pit, or having these problems at the start. You just don't expect it from these cars, these teams, and to hear that, Mercedes had a meltdown, Brandon, it's almost like unheard of because they've been so good.
No, it's very true. And to bring up quickly on your last point, though, about Monaco, I think you're right. I think it's not going anywhere. And the main reason that it's not going anywhere is the history of it. They've been racing there since, I believe, like 1929 or even older than that. And then also the money. And we've always talked about F1's about money. And so Monaco's all about money, and Monte Carlo's all about money. So, yeah, it's not going anywhere, not for this time being or any time in the near future. But yeah, Mercedes had a meltdown, dropped the ball, look at this. They couldn't get the wheel off of Valtteri Bottas's stop. It was going to be a great stop. Everybody else had a great stop, and then the front right tire couldn't come off. And I was saying to myself, oh my God, what is happening here? They're blowing it, and they always seem to blow it for Valtteri Bottas in the pit stop. And I know that's what he was thinking, too, being like, not again. And there's the picture coming up with him sitting near the tires, because this has happened to him so many times in a pit stop where he's having a great race, and then the pit stop literally ends the race for him. And what happened was the wheel nut machined itself onto the axle and onto the tire rod itself. So they just couldn't get the tire off no matter what they tried to do. And so Valtteri Bottas went from, I think he was racing in P3 or 4 at the time, to just automatically out of the race. And so there goes one car down. Mercedes is down one car. And then they put Lewis on the back foot, Lewis Hamilton on the back foot, with a poor strategy, okay? And even Lewis said it. He wanted to stay out longer. He had taken care of the tires to have a longer stint. But they decided to bring him in early and to try to slot him in. And like we've talked about around Monaco, it is so hard to pass around Monaco. So when you slot in behind another car, sometimes you're just stuck there, and you're stuck there for a while. And so they brought him in too early. Other cars stayed out longer. Sebastian Vettel was one of them. Sergio Perez was one of them. And they just managed to get ahead of Lewis in the pit stop game and in the strategy game. And so that put Lewis on the back foot. So having Lewis finish P7, which is tough for the champion, but like I said, I think he's going to bounce back just fine. Do not be worried about Lewis. He's going to bounce back. I'd be a little bit more worried about Valtteri Bottas, because he's had a rough season so far out of these 5 Grand Prix. This was looking out and shaping up to be his best finish and one of his best Grand Prix, and then the pit stop actually just ended the race for him. So it's one of those things where Mercedes is such a good team that obviously, yeah, this is rare for them. One of the last times it happened was at the German Grand Prix, where they had a 55-second pit stop for Lewis and had the wrong tires out. Or you could go back to Bahrain last season, when George Russell substituted for Lewis Hamilton, and they put the wrong set of tires on George Russell's car, and they had to bring him back in and do a tire swap. So they have had some mess ups and some screw ups recently, but it's one of those things where when you're the champion and it happens only occasionally, people are obviously going to talk about it. But I'm expecting Mercedes to bounce back, and to bounce back strong. And like I said, I'm expecting them to win a couple of Grand Prix going forward.
Yeah, you just mentioned it, Brandon. Mercedes has always been so good, and they're always on top. You have the best driver, on the circuit. You have one of the best cars. They've been so efficient. You just don't think of this as the team that's going to make this massive mistake. Or some of it's, like you mentioned, just sort of bad luck too. It's just, you see this kind of race, and you want Verstappen and Hamilton to be the 2 guys, at the end of the race going toe-to-toe to try to see who wins Monaco. And then when Hamilton's just not even close, it's sort of disappointing. There's so many good racers and drivers on the F1 circuit that it was cool to see Verstappen win. I can't remember who came in second at Monaco, but, to see that anyway is just entertaining as hell, no matter what happens and who's at the end there. But to not see Mercedes towards the end and even get a podium at Monaco is a little disappointing. But I want to ask you this question too. If you watch Drive to Survive on Netflix, or if you follow F1 racing, this does happen. There's races where drivers are told to pit a little too early, or there's a problem in the pit. How much can you implicate the driver on something like this? I mean, I know this is mostly on the pit crew. I know this is mostly on the decision to come in early. How much say does Lewis Hamilton have on coming in early as compared to the crew that's asking him to come in?
I mean, I think that's a great question. And first off, it was Carlos Sainz and Lando Norris that rounded out the podium. Yep. For McLaren and Ferrari. A big day for Ferrari to get on the podium, a big day for McLaren to get on the podium with Verstappen. But I think that's a great question, Pat. And it's one of those things where I do think Lewis does have to take some responsibility for this, because he could always say, hey, I'm staying out. I'm staying out. I don't believe it's right to come in right now. These tires are feeling good. I'm setting good sectors. I'm setting a good pace. But it's also one of these things where in F1, they literally have the best race engineers and the best strategy people. Like, I'm talking about Harvard-educated people on the pit wall, breaking down the numbers and all these things, of saying, hey, this is the right strategy. And I'm telling you, 9 out of 10 times, these strategy guys get it right. So for the driver to just go, hey, all right, I'm going to go with the strategy. I'm going to go with the strategy guy. That's not unheard of. But like you said, the driver can override it. But like I said, most times these strategies are on point. So they generally go with their race engineer and the race strategy.
Yeah, I know that if anybody on the circuit has any, can carry any weight and say is going to override their team, it's going to be Lewis Hamilton, right? I mean, he's the guy that has just the history of his career and how much he's won and how much I think his team trusts him and how the respect he has with his team, and how, he's so, we've mentioned this before the show, how polite Lewis Hamilton is to the pit crew and to the folks at Mercedes, and how great he is. I remember seeing, at the end of the year when they won it in 2019, they were taking the big team photo, and he was just like one of the guys in the crew, even though he's this incredible future Hall of Fame F1 racer. So I do think if anybody on the circuit, any driver on the circuit can kind of override the pit crew, I think it's going to be Lewis Hamilton. So I'm glad you said that, because it just seems like the pit crew always gets blamed, and some of it is them. I mean, just the strategy, like you said, the Harvard or the Oxford educated folks that are on the crew, are looking at everything even more than the drivers are about strategy and the analytics and everything like that. So I do think Hamilton's the one guy who can override the pit crew.
No, I agree with you. And trust me, he has in the past. And sometimes he's been right, other times he's been wrong. And it's one of those things where you got to take the gamble. And I really, looking back at it now, and I guarantee you Lewis looking back at it now is saying, I really wish I overrided that call and just stayed out, because I knew I had saved the tires. I had saved the tires to be able to go long, and instead we made it a short stint. So I think you're right. I think, and trust me, going forward, this might bring it up in Lewis's mind to say, all right, I'm the one that's really going to drive the strategy now at this point. Wouldn't shock me.